Hello everyone and welcome! Are you a history buff? Would you like to go on a medieval adventure to a time of knights and chivalry? Well, I'm Mike, and this is Mike's After Action Reviews, and this is the After Action Review for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. As always, guys, we are going to start off the video by quickly going through the game's production. The initial release date was on February 4th, 2025 to PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and Series S, and Microsoft Windows. The game was developed by Warhorse Studios, who you'll know from the original game in the series, Kingdom Come Deliverance from 2018, which was a partially crowd-funded indie project, and we're going to get into that in just a little bit. The game was published by Deep Silver, who you'll know from Metro Exodus in 2019 and Dead Island 2 in 2023. The music was by Jan Valta, who you will know from Kingdom Come Deliverance, the original game in the series, again from 2018, and Life is Life from 2015, which is a foreign film, so my US-based viewership might not know that one. So, moving on from the game's production, let's get into the story. The story of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is interesting to talk about, and I do not just mean the game's narrative. The development of Warhorse as a studio and the Kingdom Come IP is absolutely fascinating, and I want to spend some time just telling you about it. So the first game was crowdfunded, and the original team at Warhorse consisted of basically only 11 people, but the game in its lifetime so far has sold over 8 million copies in its lifetime, and if you're watching this, you should definitely go get that game as well. Although it wasn't perfect and had some issues, you should definitely play it to give you some lead up and narrative into the sequel here that we're talking about. So the scale of the game as an open world RPG, though, was absolutely amazing, and it's interesting because such a small team making an open world RPG, which are notoriously difficult to make, is impressive because of, it's such a small group. And after this great success, basically the studio was bought by Embracer Group and now has over 250 employees. So great job, Warhorse Studios. You guys are awesome. It's really cool to see a small studio have so much success, and I think that that's basically going to be the future of gaming, as the larger studios don't take risks, they overbloat their budgets, and it just messes everything up. This is one of the greatest success stories of crowdfunded games, many of which, as some of you know, are either scams from shady developers that get rug pulled, or are developed by small teams that run out of funding, leading to the game's eventual cancellation. So, this leads us into the second game's narrative. The Kingdom Come franchise has made a commitment to historical accuracy. This is quite tricky because if the characters are real, how do people give the player choices without changing how events happened in history and, kind of break the lore of reality, I guess you would say. So Warhorse has come up with a great solution by the way, spoiler alert for the first game if you haven't seen it, skip ahead about a minute here, okay? So they've done this by making your character the illegitimate child of a noble. This puts players in a position to be able to be part of key events while not breaking with what actually happened in history. Another great way that they did this was to have you be the companion and bodyguard of the Lord Hans Capon, who very little is known about in written history, giving developers a lot of leeway when it comes to creative license. This sort of reminds me of an old game from 2004 called The Lord of the Rings: The Third Age, in which you're playing as a group of warriors that go on a parallel adventure to the Fellowship and end up in the movie series' main battles, but while you don't exactly mingle with their story and kind of take it over and you have your own story, You are only a tertiary character that would never even be named in the annals of Middle-earth history. And it's really cool also, I gotta say, because you do have battles where you intersect with them, such as, the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, or the Battle of Helm's Deep, so with the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, you help Gandalf fight the Balrog. In Helm's Deep, you help a couple of the different characters through different parts of the battle. Gimli on the wall, Aragorn in the little area where the orcs break through the wall. It's a pretty cool little story, and basically that's how this game is run parallel to actual history. You are Henry, an unknowing bastard child of the noble Radzig Kobyla. You were raised believing that your father was actually a lowborn named Martin in the village of Skalitz in 15th century Bohemia. In the first game, Martin, along with your entire village, is killed by an invading force of Cumans under the orders of Sigismund of Luxembourg, who is trying to usurp the throne of Bohemia from his half-brother King Wenceslaus IV. Martin, your adopted father, was a very skilled blacksmith that forged a sword of particularly exceptional quality that was stolen by the raiders. This pulls you into a civil war to aid those loyal to the king as you seek revenge in your father's legendary sword. Having found out your true lineage, you are now an agent of the Resistance, with the second game picking up with you and Lord Capon acting as envoys to a powerful lord to entice him into the Resistance. You are robbed on the road and, as in many similar games, must start from scratch with no equipment and a whole new set of skills to learn. It should also be noted that there are also sequences in which you play as Godwin from the first game. He has a parallel story to the rest of the narrative as he tracks down the lost Henry and Hans. These sequences are short and lock you into small areas, forcing you to follow a set narrative. There is one thing that I can really appreciate from the developers of the game regarding story progression. Like some other open-world games, there are points in the game that are considered points of no return, where you will be taken out of the open world for a period of time to complete a narrative sequence. This often leads to quests being missed. In Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, however, the game will alert you before this happens and tell you which quests will be missed if you have not already completed them. I love this because I am one of those RPG players that like to get as much done in the game as possible on my first playthrough. So, having talked about the story, guys, our next section is the game's core gameplay mechanics. Both combat and diplomacy serve as the core mechanics of the game, much like other open-world RPGs. Combat, in my opinion, is greatly improved from the first game. The greatest improvement to the combat is how players deal with multiple combatants at the same time. In the first game, you would attack using a directional indicator with 6 points. When you are in combat, there's a mandatory lock-on system. You would switch directions to counter enemies and hit the block button when an indicator appeared, with the opportunity for perfect blocks that do not use stamina. The problem was that when facing multiple combatants, the flanking enemies would often be out of your vision range and would be impossible to block. There was also other issues, such as enemies automatically moving out of your weapon's range after landing a combo, making it difficult to press your advantage. Here, in the sequel, the mandatory lock-on and directional attack system remain intact, but attacks are limited to 3 or 4 directions depending on the weapon that you are using, and perfect blocks now restore stamina instead of just stopping you from using stamina. Encounters with multiple enemies are also easier to handle because the vision range for blocking seems to be increased greatly, and I rarely had a flanking enemy intentionally move from in front of me to directly behind me, which would make blocking them impossible. While the difficulty of dealing with multiple enemies in the first game may be more realistic, it was much more tedious and much less fun. That is not even mentioning how it actually makes the game less realistic because of how much time that you would spend walking backwards to avoid being flanked. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 has a variety of both melee and ranged weapons for you to choose from. Let's start by talking about the melee weapons. Heavy weapons includes axes and hammers. These primarily do blunt damage that actually does damage to enemy equipment and is more effective when dealing with armor than other weapon types. Polearms have a longer range and are versatile, but the trade-off is being less effective at one damage type than other weapons. The problem that I had with polearms in the game is that there are not spears or other weapons that you can use with a shield. Lastly, let's talk about the absolute best weapon type in the game, swords. Swords deal high slashing and stabbing damage, allowing them to cause bleeding and be effective at hitting weak points in armor. It should also be noted that all weapons have combos that you can perform by attacking consecutively while changing the direction of your strikes in the proper sequence. These attacks break opponents' defenses, deal more damage, or both. What puts swords far above any other weapon type in the game is that they are the only weapons that can perform master strikes. A master strike is performed by striking from the opposite direction of your opponent's attack within the time window of a perfect block. Master strikes are unblockable counterattacks that work defensively by riposting an enemy's attack, but also have potential for very high damage depending on where they hit, such as the extra damage when you hit an enemy in the face. The implementation of the Master Strike mechanic is not perfect. I asked myself a few times while playing if it made the game too easy. Thinking about it though, I have decided that I really like it because it gives you the opportunity to live out a medieval power fantasy as a well-trained swordsman who is able to easily dispatch common bandits. I also know that some people may think that the changes make the combat too simplistic and much less of a skill-based challenge. I understand these criticisms, but would say that the pros of accessibility and the fun power fantasy overcome any of the downsides. Alright, so let's get into ranged weapons. There are 3 ranged weapon types in the game: bows, crossbows, and handguns. There are 2 things to consider when using bows: strength and draw speed. The strength of the bow is one part of what determines how much damage it does. The other is ammo. Draw speed is a hidden stat that determines how long it takes to fully draw the bow. These 2 stats have a major effect on how you will use the bow because aiming and firing will be different based on these stats. In general, bows with higher strength have a slower draw speed. Higher strength bows, such as longbows, may be better in combat, but lower strength bows with faster draw speeds are better for competition shooting, where the speed will gain you more points, and hunting, where you may need to shoot an animal multiple times before it runs away. Crossbows sacrifice speed for power and simpler aiming mechanics and follow the same pattern as bows. Higher power means slower reloading speed. The trade-off here does not make crossbows unviable. You can load your crossbow before combat, fire at an enemy to initiate the fight, and then switch to your melee weapon as they approach. Handguns are basically handheld siege cannons and are very tricky. While they deal very high damage, they take longer to reload than a majority of crossbows and are very inaccurate and have a very short range. Because of the long reload time and short range, I prefer to stick to the other ranged weapons in the game outside of very specific circumstances. It should also be noted that ammo types can have a great effect on ranged combat. The ammo you use influences weapon range, damage, armor penetration, and some ammo types cause bleeding. These changes to how a weapon will perform give players choices when it comes to how they want to approach combat. The second core gameplay mechanic in the game that I mentioned before is diplomacy. Like many other RPGs, not every encounter need end with combat, and being able to influence other people through dialogue can lead to better outcomes and even uncover secrets in the game. The Kingdom Come franchise has a complex and in-depth approach to diplomacy. There are 7 dialogue stats that affect diplomacy. Speech is the primary skill that affects dialogue and represents your overall ability to influence others. Charisma is a representation of how good you look and has a slight effect on the success of most skill checks in conversations. This is calculated using the average charisma values of the outer layers of your clothing and how cleaned and maintained they are. Damaged or dirty clothes will lower your score. This value can also be increased using perfumes crafted with alchemy and has a max value of 30. There are 6 secondary skills that are represented during dialogue as skill checks to choose from. All dialogue checks are influenced by your reputation with the person that you are talking to. Some are easier with a low reputation, and some with a higher reputation. The 3 high reputation checks are persuasion, impression, and presence. Persuasion is your ability to dominate a conversation with your cleverness and eloquence, and is derived from your speech level and charisma. Impression allows you to assert yourself using charisma and good manners. This check is calculated using your charisma and speech level. Finally, presence allows you to influence others with your combat prowess and your knightly appearance. This check is a byproduct of your strength, agility, and vitality stats. The low reputation checks are coercion, domination, and intimidation. Coercion is your ability to trick people and be underhanded to get what you want. It is affected by your speech and charisma levels. Domination is your way of getting what you want by being a jerk and threatening others. It is derived from your charisma and speech level. Intimidation allows you to scare people into doing what you want and is calculated based on the quality of your weapons and armor and your strength, agility, and vitality levels. This stat is also increased if you are dirty or bloodied. Now that we've gone over the game's core gameplay mechanics, we have one more section before we get into our final review score. Let's go into the special features section and take a look at all the complex systems working in the background. If you were looking for a single word to describe the systems that make up Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, that word would be, as mentioned before, realistic. One of the best things about RPGs is getting cool gear and slaying enemies with badass weapons. The developers have implemented a unique gear system with you equipping your character pretty much how you would equip yourself in real life. Unlike some other games of the genre, there are multiple layers to your equipment, with each item offering its own protection and affecting your stats in its own way. Starting at your skin, you will put on a shirt, then a coat or gambeson, and then an outer layer of actual armor, and even clothing pieces that you can wear over your armor like a cloak. Without wearing a gambeson, you cannot wear an outer layer because the gambeson not only protects you from enemy attacks, but also protects your skin from your armor. This is the same for headgear. This is exactly how it worked with actual knights throughout history. Along with some of the stats that I have already mentioned, there are other secondary stats that are affected by your gear. These stats, along with charisma, all max out at 30 and include speed, conspicuousness, noise, and visibility. Speed determines how fast you move and is derived primarily from your agility level, the weight of your armor, and to a lesser extent your strength. Heavy armor slows you down and increases the stamina cost of actions, but this is mitigated by your strength level. Conspicuousness, noise, and visibility are the game's stealth stats and are all primarily determined by your equipped armor or clothing. Relevant skills and perks also affect stealth. Conspicuousness determines how likely people are to pay attention to and recognize you. Noise and visibility are straightforward. Visibility makes you easier to spot, and noise makes you easier to hear. Sneaking increases your stealth capabilities, while sprinting does the opposite. This system reminds me of the older Elder Scrolls games. In Morrowind, instead of just having head, chest, hands, and feet slots, there was shoulder armor, greaves, boots, and even a skirt. While I do love Morrowind, these systems here in this game are a bit more in depth. While this is not a survival game, there are survival elements that influence your character. Your character has nourishment and energy levels. Allowing yourself to become too hungry or too tired will negatively affect your physical stats. Hunger is managed through eating, but overeating will also cause negative effects. In the most extreme circumstances, you can even starve to death. Energy is depleted by any physical activities that you do and just being awake in general. Managing energy is done by simply sleeping, with better quality beds replenishing energy faster. Alcohol can also help manage energy, but drinking too much will make you tired. Just like with the nourishment level, in the most extreme circumstances, you can starve to death or die from exhaustion. Along with managing everything with Henry, you also have your two sidekicks, Mutt and your horse. Mutt is the trusty companion that you got in the first game. He will help you search for things in the world and fight alongside you in combat. He has an obedience that decreases over time and when Mutt is damaged in combat. You manage his obedience by feeding and petting him regularly. When his obedience decreases, Mutt may refuse your commands and even temporarily leave. Alongside Mutt, as I mentioned before, your horse Pebbles also makes a return. While you are able to keep Pebbles as a trusty steed, unlike the first game, you can purchase or even steal other horses throughout the game, with each horse having its own courage, speed, stamina, and carry capacity stats. Each of these are influenced by the saddle and armor that you equip your horse with. Just for everyone's information, the courage stat determines how likely your horse is to get scared or even buck you off during combat or other stressful situations. The game has some extensive crafting systems that work like minigames. Blacksmithing involves actually heating and hammering metals to make weapons or horseshoes. This, in contrast to most games which just have you selecting what you would like to make in a menu. The player can also repair their bladed weapons on a grindstone by adjusting the angle of the weapon while spinning the wheel. This can be an effective way to make money in the game, as well-crafted weapons sell for plenty of gold. Alchemy is the other form of crafting in the game and may be considered by some as more lucrative than smithing. Alchemy is performed at the alchemy table using a base for your concoction, water, wine, oil, or spirits, the necessary ingredients added in the proper sequence, and boiling everything together with precise timing. You will use recipes from a book to know when and how to add your ingredients to your cauldron, and using a sand timer, you must boil the cauldron for precisely as long as outlined in the recipe book. The greater precision when performing alchemy, the more potency that whatever you are making will have, whether that be potions, poisons, or even gunpowder. One last note about alchemy is, while you can find recipes around in the world, if you already know the recipe, like on a second playthrough, or if you look it up online, you can actually just make it, and then you will automatically have learned the recipe after you've completed the potion or poison or even gunpowder that you're making. So now it's time to tell you about one of the more fun special features in the game, the dice game. The dice game is a variant of the game Farkle and is a fun way to make money in the world of medieval Bohemia. There is a whole game in and of itself built around playing dice in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and I absolutely love it. Simply put, each round players throw 6 die and select which die to keep and which to re-roll, something like Yahtzee. 1s and 5s are worth 100 points and 50 points respectively and can be kept at any time, while other numbers are kept in sets of 3. If you successfully use up all your die on your turn, you can start over, rolling all 6 die again. The different combinations of die that you keep earn you different point values as you play. There are also die that have different likelihoods of rolling each number, and badges that can be used to affect the game in specialized ways, such as allowing you to double the points you earn during a turn. I really enjoyed the dice game and am currently working on getting all the special die. Seriously, this is so much fun, and I know it sounds really weird to even include it in the review because you might think of it as a small thing, but it really is, like I said, a game in and of itself, and I had a fun time with it. So lastly, but surely not least, let's get into the game's extensive progression system. This system is much like the one that I highly praised in Cyberpunk 2077. So, for some background here, there are 2 common character progression systems in games. The traditional one, in which you gain experience points toward your level, with each level increasing your stats and giving you a skill point to spend on a new perk or ability. And the progression by performance system, most commonly known from Bethesda Softworks' open-world RPGs. In the progression by performance system, characters do not gain experience through quests and killing enemies, but instead gain experience for individual skills through use. The more you use your sword, the better you are at using your sword. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, much like Cyberpunk 2077, combines both systems. Your main level is increased from experience you earn doing quests and the total experience that you earn across all stats and skills. As you increase either your main level, stats, or skills, you will earn points to spend on perks relevant to each of them respectively. So if you level up your main level, there is a main level perk tree that you can invest in. If you level up your strength, there's a strength perk tree. There's a perk tree for every attribute or skill. Each of the perks that you obtain will help you when performing tasks relevant to their stat or skill. Your main level perks offer bonuses that can greatly affect your playstyle. Something that I really appreciated in this system is that you can max out all stats and skills, and you can get almost every perk in the game, except for a few mutually exclusive perks that you will have to choose between. This seems very realistic to me because the average lifespan in medieval times, I think it was like 30 or 40, but even in 30 or 40 years, starting off as a young kid, you can become a competent swordsman, you could learn the blacksmithing trade, you can learn a menagerie of skills in real life, and especially nowadays where you can live to be like 70 years old, and like I play an instrument, I know videography, I can sing, there's just reading, writing, math, all that stuff. And it's not like I had to, pick a build for myself in real life. So it makes sense that in a game that's trying to be realistic, you wouldn't have to either. So, most mutually exclusive perks appear in the main level perk tree and include things like Martin's Heritage that increases experience gains with swordsmanship, crafting, and survival skills, while Radzig's Heritage makes heavy weapons, shooting, and scholar skills improve faster. This is a big deal to me because I am one of those players that plans out their build way ahead of time, but here I don't have to because I can get everything. So then let's move into my final statement and review score. So my sustains are the realistic simulation mechanics. It's really cool that you can make your weapons by heating and hammering the metal, and alchemy, and that whole process. Now there is a setting that you can change to make that a little easier if you really don't want to deal with that, and I appreciate that, but for me, it's really cool. It's a really part of the whole experience, so I really like that. There's also the multi-layered progression system. I just think that this type of progression system is awesome. I really liked it in Cyberpunk, and from now on I would really like more games to have this. Because the progression by performance mixed with increasing a main level and being able to have certain perks by the progression of each attribute, it's really cool. It allows you to get more of what you want, stick to a build, but then also with your main level and the perks that you're going to get just from having your level can also affect your playstyle in a meaningful way, separate from how you deal with combat or other activities. So I really appreciate that. It gives you more options. So, there's also my third sustain, which is great writing. You are going to be interested in what is happening in even mundane quests, something like The Witcher 3. You might have a person who... so first of all, the main quest, you have Hans Capon and all these awesome characters, and it's very interesting, and it's kind of this epic journey. But then even in the smaller side quests, you will have a character who's looking for his lost horse, I don't know, or trying to romance a girl, or you're trying to help the local herbalist who people think is basically a witch, but she's really not, and she's just works with herbs. Okay, that's really awesome. The way that the character writing is, again, much like Witcher 3, will make you really interested. You'll be saying to yourself, wow, I can't believe that I'm seriously invested in, finding this guy's lost axe that he dropped while chopping wood. It's a bunch of cool stuff like that. I really like it. Okay, so then let's get into the improves. I really only have one major improve. That doesn't mean the game is perfect, but almost every system that I ran into was good enough that it's like, this is really good, and I don't really see a reason to try to harp on it as far as an improvement for the sake of people who haven't played the game. I don't want to give you a bad idea of how the systems work. But anyway, my one real improve is master strikes for different weapons. Basically, in this game, you are locked in, except for in very specific circumstances, you're locked into using a sword. One thing because of Master Strikes. So one thing also that really makes that a thing is that you can get two-handed swords. Some of the perks other than Master Strikes are so good. For instance, so you have two-handed swords that do a lot of damage. Later on in the game, you can get a perk where you can hold two-handed swords in one arm. So basically, I use my two-handed sword, and it uses two-handed sword combos, but really you don't need the combos because you have Master Strikes. But then also, when I'm outnumbered, I put on my shield. It makes it easier to block, and increases your armor value and all that awesome stuff. So it's just swords are so far ahead that it basically limits your gameplay options if you want to be the most powerful that you can be. And there's always people who say, well, you know, then don't use swords. But it's really hard for players to make that decision when you know that swords are so much fun and have this great power fantasy. I don't like it when developers basically put that decision on players. Like, we've made this one thing so good that it's almost an exploit. So you have to choose between using this really awesome, totally cool thing that we put in the game or the crappy stuff. So I really, really don't like that. Okay, so then basically, that's basically the actual after-action reviews with Sustain Improves. Let's get into basically my final statement here. I really like this game. The story of how it came about is really interesting. That doesn't really affect my review score, but it's just cool to mention. It's been a long time since we've seen a really good open world RPG. I mean, think about it. Starfield wasn't good, nobody liked it. Skyrim was like 13 years ago. Fallout 4, which was, I mean, it was good, but it wasn't as good as the others, was a long time ago. And then when you look at the ones that were peak, like Fallout New Vegas, I mean, that was forever ago, but it's also so good that I still play it. And then you got to think to yourself, if I'm still playing Fallout New Vegas, why has nothing replaced that for me? Well, now we have this game, and it's not exactly the same. It's not fantasy, but it's basically realistic medieval combat and stuff. Now we have this game, though, and you might return to those other games because of the fantasy elements. But this game is so good, and it's realistic. I love the simulation stuff. That simulation stuff and the good writing basically makes it a very cool and satisfying world to just exist in. You know, take your character, go for a walk, meet another character, have a cool conversation, maybe get a quest, maybe go out in the wilderness and find something awesome. There's a lot for you to do, and it all feels great, even if it's not, really affecting things on the quote-unquote grander scale. Also, another thing about open world RPGs and RPGs in general is that character progression system that basically allows you to, numbers go up is cool, but also just crafting your character in the way that you like, being able to play the way that you like, which again, I thought was hindered by Master Strikes being only on swords. There's some really cool combos that they could have implemented with, hammers, spears, those axes, those cool things. But all right, so then I'm going to just tell you guys, I think that this game, I'm giving it 2 thumbs way up. Excellent. I really liked it. I think you guys should definitely go check it out. I do apologize for the review coming out late. I really like open world RPGs, but I really hate reviewing open world RPGs because it takes me a long time to finish them, and then if anything happens in life or with the channel, then it's even more delayed. This one was good, guys. Go check it out. Thank you all for watching. God bless you, and have a good day. Don't forget to check me out on Twitch and join the Discord where you can voice chat with me while I live stream, and you won't be recorded or anything on YouTube and Twitch, so that's pretty cool. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram. If you like to read, you can see my after-action reports on my blog. And if you are interested, you can get some merch from my spring store. The links for everything are in the description below.